Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leadership with Ed. Today, we're joined by my good friend, Jordan Montgomery, who's actually one of the fastest growing influencers and thought leaders in the country today. He's a author, coach, mentor, and friend of so many. So welcome, Jordan.
Ed, thanks for having me, man. This is fun. Anytime I get to hang with you, learn from you, consider it a privilege. So thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time today. Jordan, before we get to some of the questions on leadership, which is, what this podcast is about, something I've always been intrigued with, and what you're one of the best up and comers in this area. But tell everyone a little bit just about your story and how you got into this space.
Yeah. So I'm from small town Iowa, went to the University of Iowa, graduated from Iowa, and then decided, you know what? I just want to run my own thing. I don't want to have a boss. I would appreciate being able to kind of call the shots. My dad was a blue collar, he's a painting contractor. So he had a little crew, like 3 or 4 guys. And so not a fancy business, but my dad was present at every one of my games. And I just remember thinking, I want to be like my dad. I want to be at my kids' activities. I want to have some control over my schedule. And so I went to school kind of like a social experiment. And then I thought, well, then when I graduate, after I, have fun at the bars and meet some people, I'll graduate and I'll just start my business. Well, then I get out of school and I realize I don't have any money and I have 0 experience. So looks like I'm going to go work for somebody. So I found financial planning. I could kind of, grow this business sort of, for myself, but not by myself. I had support. I didn't have to put a ton of money in. And so, as you know, Ed, I have this, kind of run in the financial services business. I have this life-changing event, April 1st, 2015, sort of propels me into this new career that I'm in now. And we could talk about that experience, it well. But I started coaching 5 people, 5 turned into 15. And then from there, like doors just continued to open. And so I sort of fell into it. It wasn't necessarily by design. I wish I could say that. And so today, we're a team of 23. My wife and I run the business together. She's smarter than I am. I just do this all day, every day. She runs the business, and then I just hang out with, guys like Ed. So, but we do leadership development, organizational health. That's really our focus. And it's just working with teams and leaders to help them maximize their potential and talent.
You know what I found interesting just in talking to you about some of your clients and the people you work with, and it really varies from executives to professional athletes. I think the athletes has been intriguing to me because you think of people at the top of their game, they're in the NFL or the NBA, et cetera, and some of the fears and challenges and things that they have. It really isn't that different than all of us. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think athletes, one of the things they struggle with, that we all struggle with, is this issue of identity. But I think they struggle with it maybe more. It's more pronounced because people fall in love with what they do. I mean, so much so that they've got, large followings and fans and people buying their jerseys. But then people don't really know anything about it. So it's like you've got all these fans and followers that just have fallen in love with what you do, but they don't really know who you are. And I think all of us have had that experience, at least on some level. I have a friend, he said, if you live for their praise, you'll die by their criticism. And so then all of a sudden, when you're not performing as well, or then especially when you retire, it's like, well, who are you, right? Because all these people loved you before when you were performing well, but now you're not. And so the following changes or the influence changes, and that can really cause, I think, some serious, just identity issues if someone's not really grounded, not living with purpose and not connected, to the right things or to the right people. So I'd say that's one of the issues, but you're right, Ed, that like, hey, we all struggle with that. Athletes aren't different. Maybe for them, it's just a little more pronounced, but that's something that we're really committed to helping people with. Not that we have all the answers. I've lived that myself, and man, I want people to live on purpose, live with be on mission, and to also feel known and to realize that, man, they aren't what they do. What they do is a gift and a blessing, but they were created for, an entirely different purpose as well.
Do you find too, when people hit the upper echelon of success, you got so many eyes on you, whether it be in the corporation or you'd mentioned the financial planning world, when you think of a professional athlete, it just seems like there's so much more to lose, or you're so much more out there. and people are watching and looking. And I would imagine that that adds a degree of vulnerability, stress, expectation to always be performing.
Yeah, I think, you have walked this out well. So I'll pick on you for a second. There's this idea that, people don't want to follow a leader who's always right. They want to follow a leader who's always real. So I think authenticity and even vulnerability, I think it becomes more important. The more your influence expands, the more important it becomes that you really work hard to stay grounded and you keep it real with your people. That people can see,
Yeah.
hey, I've got chinks in my armor. I'm not perfect. There's a bunch of stuff I don't know. One of my mentors, John Maxwell, says always teach as a fellow learner. Like I don't have it all figured out. Like I'm just love to share with you some
Huh.
things that I'm learning or some things that I'm figuring out or here's some mistakes that I've made. And people want to be around a leader like that. And so yeah, I think the pressure can become greater, but also the call to authenticity and vulnerability, I think is more significant. I think that's something that you and Ross and the leaders in your team have managed really well. And just staying close to your people because success, if we're not careful, becomes a separator. It separates us from people. And
Yeah.
so it's like, man, how do we close that gap, keep it real, and let people know that, man, we're just far from perfect, and vulnerability matters.
Do you find too, just the further you move up, sometimes it can be fine. It can be harder to find people that can relate to what you're going through, and or you don't want to talk or mention some of the struggles or things that are happening to maybe your peers or friends that aren't quite to your level. That came out wrong, but the same problems because they're kind of elevating you that you don't have problems or that person's always doing so well and so successful, and it can be a struggle to find people and peers that are going through the same things you are as you move up, whether it be as a professional athlete, an executive, within your family, etc.
That's a great question. We all struggle with this. I know I've struggled with this. Certain times, maybe more than others. But what happens is I think we tend to compare our inside to someone else's outside. It's like I know all my own issues, I know my junk, I know all the things that I've screwed up and the things that I'm going through, and it's like, well, I don't necessarily know that about somebody else. Like I might not know all that about Ed. So then I just look at your life and I'm like, well, geez, Ed's got this huge team and this great family, and he's just living life, to the fullest and no issues. And it's like, and then I play this comparison game, and the quickest way to kill something special is to compare it to something else. And so now I've got all kinds of insecurities, and I don't feel like I can talk about these things because, gosh, other people aren't dealing with them. What I found in just working with a lot of high level leaders is, man, we are all desperately in need of support and care and advice and help. And I do think it's really hard for leaders to find a safe place where they can share things and work through issues and problems. And so, yes, I think if there's some high level leaders listening, if you feel like, man, I don't have that space where I can share or vent or bounce ideas, man, figure that out because those relationships are so meaningful. And one thing I just add to that, Ed, before we move on, is that truth trumps flattery. Like, pick on you again
Huh.
here for a second, maybe you and Ross. I know it feels good to get a pat on the back, like you and Ross, and you're getting a lot of those, right? Because you built something really special. And so whether it be from clients or peers or whatever, it's like, Ed, Ross, great job. McGill, Jung, you guys are awesome. That feels good. And I hope that always happens. But what's actually more valuable to you is when somebody can share some truth because there's not as many people willing to do that as there are give you a pat on the back. And I know you would say, yeah, the pat on the back feels good, but you're right. Developmentally, like I need more, truth than I need pats on the back. So long as that's delivered in a loving, caring way, I think truth trumps flattery, especially for high level leaders, because most of them just aren't getting near enough feedback and they feel alone in their ability to have, real conversation about things that matter.
You said that differently one time when we had a conversation, and I like the phrase you said. Who are the truth sayers in your life? Do you have those two, three, four, five individuals that are going to hold you accountable, call you out, compliment when things are going well, but then say, dude, this is where I'm seeing some conflict with what, how you're trying to live, whether it be personally or professionally. How do you find a truth sayer in your life?
Well, I think it's first off how you come at the relationship, right? So, we get into this idea of leading up and we start to think about honor and initiative and motives. Here's what I'd say. I think if someone is honorable, they want the best for you, they're honoring you, they're kind to you, um, they have pure motives, their desires to help you. And there's someone who's taking initiative, like they're moving toward you and they're proactive, then I think they're positioned to share the truth. Not everybody's positioned to share the truth. Um, I also think how you share the truth is a really big deal. I'll just share two thoughts. I think you've been thoughtful about this, Ed. One would be timing. So many times,
Yeah.
we just have poor timing. Like my wife will say, "Your timing is so awful." It's just bad timing. Just I want to share something. It's like, dude, the house is on fire. Like the kids are like, what are you thinking? This is not the time. So this is going to sound really elementary. Here's one thing that's worked like in our marriage, but I think this also applies to teams, and colleagues, is just this idea of respecting. If I had something I wanted to share with you, Ed, I might say, "Hey, Ed, is now a time to have a safe conversation." Whatever word you want to insert, difficult conversation. We say safe. Just hey, is now a time to have a safe conversation. And then
Oh, I like that.
you get to say, no, actually, right now is not a good time. Like I'm getting ready for a meeting, or it's been a really stressful morning, or
Yep.
and then I need to respect that. I got to be able to say, unless it's an emergency, right? I then say, okay, respect that. When would be a better time? And then you get to say, you know what, I'll call you on my drive home tonight, or let's meet first thing tomorrow morning, or whatever. That little question, respecting a boundary, can just completely change the way that difficult conversation goes down, both in terms of my ability to deliver it, but more than anything, your ability to receive it. Second thing I think about a lot is this idea between calling up and calling out. And I know that all of us want to think when we have difficult conversations, our motives are pure. I'll just be the first to say, full disclosure on this podcast, sometimes when I have a difficult conversation, my motives are not pure. They're like, because I'm emotional, right? And so I might say to one of my kids, like, you screwed that up. Like, that's so dumb. Don't do that again. That's not how we do it. Well, my motive is not to be helpful. My motive is to tell them that they're wrong.
Stop that.
Stop
Yep.
that. You're wrong. That wasn't done. That's wrong. And I just want you to feel bad about it. We can all be guilty of that. Sometimes if we change the timing, we step back from it, it can actually change the motive. And so what I want to do is I want to call you up instead of call you out. So call you up might be after I've asked, hey, can we have a safe conversation? Okay, yep, that's fine. It's a good time for that. Hey, Ed, man, you're such a valuable part of our team. Man, you have unbelievable influence. I'm watching the way that people respond to you in this meeting. And I know that you have great intentions. Actually, I think a lot of what you're saying is really profound and helpful. I know you have great intentions. You're coming from the right place. But because of the influence that you have and the amount of people that listen to you, I feel responsible just to share this as a piece of feedback if you're willing to listen. If you tweaked this or if you changed that, now I start to give you the actual feedback. But I'm coming at it from a place of care. Hey, care about you. You're an important part of our team. You've got influence. People are paying attention. It's because of all that I feel responsible to share this. And then I'm going to end that with, hey, Ed, is there anything I'm missing? Because I might, this is just my opinion. This is something I'm seeing. Is there anything I'm missing? And you might say, yeah, Jordan, there is something you're missing. You have no context for this conversation, or
Right. Here's some additional
some
additional data
information.
points.
Yeah. Do you want to add to that though? Because I think you've made a living having challenging conversations with all kinds of people. Like anything that you think about when you consider challenging conversations?
Well, I always want people to have takeaways from this. And so the first thing I thought about was just that great comment of who are the truth sayers in your life. So hopefully if you're listening to this, you take the time to jot down 2, 3, 4, and even acknowledge to those people,
Yeah.
I see you in this spot in my life. And so I am going to be asking, for that feedback. The second thing is, assuming positive intent. Do you have that relationship with the person? Have they always been straight with you? And if you're unsure, then when they first give feedback, assume positive intent. Because I think a lot of times the natural reaction is to give that feedback like that you had asked for right away. Well, you don't know, or you're not in my shoes, or you're not this. And so I think it's taken a step back. And then the third piece has been helpful for me is to think through, there's your truth, there's my truth, and then there's something probably, right in the middle. But if you have those strong relationships with the truth sayers and you know that it is always for the benefit of getting better and that those people always have your back, then you can process what they're saying, think through it, add additional information if it is needed. But I think the natural reaction, Jordan, is to probably get defensive or to add, the data right away. And then it doesn't end up creating or making something better, if that makes sense.
That's great. Yeah, I've watched you do this, this idea that we got to pay attention where there's tension. Because you're right, our natural response is not to be like, tell me more about that, or that's interesting. It's like, no, you're wrong. Like, quit it. So let's say you're sharing some difficult feedback with me. Yeah, my walls might start to come up, and that's not fun to hear. But man, this is where I really need to pay attention, because this could be where the breakthrough happens or the real learning occurs, right? Like you're about to tell me, hey, dude, you got lettuce in your teeth. Take it out of your teeth. And if I'm just like, nope, you're wrong, and I walk away, I'm not going to get the lesson. And so where there's tension, pay attention. Instead of walling you off, I might say something like, hey, Ed, could you give me an example of that? Or could we go a little bit deeper there? Or, hey, as you see that in me, where is that most pronounced? Or are there certain environments where you see that, more than others? So I think that's really important. And then the one last thing I'll add, we could probably spend an hour on just difficult conversations. Here's something I'm learning is if I, with my team, don't do this from a position of strength when things aren't on fire, the feedback conversation never goes as well. In other words, if feedback isn't a regular part of what you do, and you're only ever giving feedback when something goes wrong, then you're really offering feedback from a position of conflict instead of offering
that's a great point.
Feedback from a position of strength. So what about, hey, it's Monday morning, we're just going to pick somebody on the team, with their permission, and it's just 10 minutes of, hey, here's something we want you to start, stop, keep. I know we talked about this with your team, Ed, and actually 90% of it's really positive. And it ends up being actually a really encouraging exercise, but it just creates a small window for you to offer someone some constructive feedback when things are calm, nothing's on fire, they haven't done anything wrong. It's just a regular part of what you do is just honest, helpful, timely feedback. And so I think that's another key to just making sure that feedback goes well and it's received well.
Not only received well, I think if you don't create the environment where that is welcomed, especially as your team continues to get larger and you have newer people on the team, that if they get shut down right away or they feel, well, that person's not going to listen anyway, I think it is creating that culture of that healthy conflict or questioning ultimately for the benefit of the team. As long as that is always known that everything is for the benefit of the team or the clients or for the industry or for whatever you're doing, it is pretty powerful when you do have those checks and balances and those courageous conversations and people willing to step up for you. And so you got to celebrate the ones that are going to be true sayers.
That's right.
Because they're stepping out as well, taking a chance that, that you're going to receive that.
Well said. This idea of like we're almost mining for conflict or tension. It's like, how do we find it, right? Like I'm always worried about the team that doesn't have any tension. It's like, this is just dishonest. Like, let's cut it with the dishonest harmony. Let's mine for some honest conflict. Let's have real conversations. We're all imperfect, but to your point, create an environment where it's consistent. We're having that dialogue a lot. It's safe. I think that's really key to, just good, solid communication and feedback.
Yeah. And I want to switch gears. We have your book here in our office, The Art of Encouragement by Jordan Montgomery, How to Lead Teams, Spread Love, and Serve from the Heart. Tell me, what was the inspiration behind this? And I've noticed more and more leaders like yourself adding, maybe more of a spiritual sense to some of their teachings in different pieces. But tell me what grabbed your heart to get you to write a book and what you've learned from that.
Well, probably the true impetus for it was going through a really hard experience. We've all been through hard things.
Yep.
And I think to know encouragement means that you also know pain. You've been on both sides of that. And I think in my pain, and I'm happy to talk about that today, is I had some people who really encouraged me in that really difficult pain or that difficult season. And so then you remember that, right? You hold on to that and you remember the people who are kind to you and good to you. And I think so often, Ed, we reduce this topic of encouragement to something we either do or don't do. It's like I'm an encourager
Mhm.
or I'm not an encourager,
Yep.
or it's my style or it's not my style. And I want to push back on that. I'm like, man, I think actually encouragement's a choice. It's not a style. Because if you had your last day with somebody that you really loved or cared about, um, all of us, every human, would find a way to encourage and to be kind and to be good. And so that's part of it. Is man, this is a choice, not a style. That's part of the reason we wrote a book. Is like I think everybody can do it. It's a language that everybody understands. Everybody knows how to do it. It comes more natural to some than it does to others. But it also, I think, addresses one of our most basic human needs, which is the need to feel valued. Like all of us want to be valued, known, understood. Like I want to know that my life is bigger than just me, that my life has purpose.
Yeah.
So I think when you help someone feel known, valued, seen, and understood, it's like, man, that's the art of encouragement. And so, in short, to know brokenness is to know encouragement. I think all of us speak this language, but it gets reduced so often to a style. Okay, I don't think that's true. I think all of us can do it. And I think when you do it, you address one of the most basic needs that we all have, which is this idea of I want to feel valued, I want to feel known. And so, and final thing is, I don't think this is just like the right thing to do. I think this is a strategy for winning with people. So as we think about the art of encouragement, whether it's with clients, colleagues, friends in our community, our family, you want to win and have healthy relationships. I think this matters. And if you get around a great encourager, so Ed, you're really good at this. There's a lot of nuance that goes into somebody who really understands how to elevate, encourage, draw near to people. It's not just that simple of just do it or don't do it. So that's why, hence the title, The Art of Encouragement. So long response to a
Yeah.
short question, but that's why a little bit about why we wrote the book.
Well, I found the whole encouragement piece just interesting in general because you can overdo it and then it becomes the person saying, are they sincere? You have a chapter in there on authenticity.
Yeah.
Are they feeling like this is natural and you're truly encouraging them? And then I think also too, there's a fine line of over elevating someone. Like, oh, Jordan, you're just killing it. You're the greatest. You're the best ever. And in reality, you have so many more steps, in your own leadership development. So I think there's a authenticity to encouragement where people, when it does happen, it feels special versus Jordan says that to me every Monday. I think it's just part of his routine.
Yeah. Don't you also think, Ed, it's about having a relationship where you're willing to share the hard stuff or poke fun or like, you know, part of it, like in our relationship, I think, we've had some challenging conversations and there's a willingness for you to call me up or to give me a hard time. So it's not always just this warm, fuzzy, hunky dory. Everything's good, right? Because you're right. I think that wears on people, right? We're like, I don't even know if that's real or if I can even trust it because every time we talk, it's like you're over the top in your pleasantries or your encouraging comments. Um, BJ Hellier taught me this. He said, hey, just don't ever encourage someone if you're not going to share an example or be specific. And that's a really
Ooh, great line.
simple
Yeah.
strategy and authentic encouragement is specificity. Like, it's not good enough to just say, well, Ed, you're a really great communicator. Keep going, keep communicating or whatever. Because we do that, right? It's like, Ed, you're a great
Yep.
communicator. It's like what I probably should say is, well, what makes you a great communicator? It's like, Ed, you're a great communicator. Hey, one of the things that I think you do better than about anybody I've ever met is you balance levity with candor. You can have really serious comments and drive change and challenge, and then you find a way to inject humor and lighten the mood and make people feel safe, in the context of sometimes even a serious conversation. That is a real gift of yours. And so that would be an example of I'm being authentic. And this isn't just a, oh, way to go, Ed. This is, hey, I mean it, like when I say it, and I'm paying attention. Any thoughts on that?
Mhm. Well, it leads to a second comment or question that I had for you because I've seen you develop some relationships with some incredible people, across, the country. Some of the top influencers and, whether it be a John Maxwell or John Gordon, and you'd mentioned about talking to Ed Milet the other day and pieces. But you had said, I heard you say to someone, if you want to become important to someone or part of their inner circle, you've got to dive into them with no expectations. Create I'm going to be a valuable resource to Jordan Montgomery over the next year, and just think about ways to bring value without the expectation that something's going to come. Maybe expand on that a little bit, how you've been able to build these relationships, because I think that's another point that someone could take from this.
Yeah, Mark Cole taught me this kind of valuable lesson. I was asking Mark, who's the CEO of Maxwell Leadership, who Ed,
Yep.
and I was asking him about his relationship with John. And I said, okay, next to Margaret, you've got about as much influence in John's life as anyone. Like he really trusts you and you guys are super close. I said, but how'd you develop that kind of trust with John, over 20 plus years? And Mark said something I'll never forget. He said, if you want to develop trust with any leader, he said, just make their agenda your agenda for a season. You got to do it authentically. But what he was saying is figure out what they care about and get behind it, support them, add value. And he said, I've just been doing that with John for 20 plus years, is just making his agenda my agenda. And again, we got to do that authentically. And that goes two ways. It's like part of it is, hey, get excited about what they're excited about, but also sit with them when they're not excited. Like is there a problem that they have or an issue that they're trying to solve for? It's like, okay, well then dive into that issue, get behind that momentum, like figure out a leader's agenda, make it your agenda for a season. I think, this about me, Ed. I mean, I'm a 2.5 GPA from the University of Iowa. I was 21 on my ACT.
Cumulative for both semesters added together.
It's so bad. I shouldn't even admit this. I probably need to cut this out of any of my public comments, but I had to take the ACT twice. I was a 17 my first time, which I think 15 is like guessing. And I tried, to be clear. I tried. I was 17 and then I was a 21. I mean, I don't know. I'm from small town. I have no business being in this conversation with you at the table with the John Maxwell. The only thing I think I've ever been able to do is just you try to figure out how do you add value to somebody and care about what they care about. And I wasn't able to say it that way or articulate it that way. What Mark shared with me, make their agenda your. But I think that has been part of the relationship recipe. And I think if you look at any great leader, you're an example of this. I think you've got many, many, many years of doing that for people, whether you were able to articulate it that way or not. And it's the same reason you've built all these, amazing relationships. So do you want to comment on that? Because I think that's been an MO for you for years.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking about our own team here and our next generation leaders and owners, at McGill Jungie, and you said something where you said, make yourself valuable to that person, make their agenda your agenda. And I see these great young professionals. We are so blessed here, Jordan. These young team members, their development, their growth, their leadership. But as soon as you said that, I was thinking of a couple of them that they just keep asking me, how do you like this to flow? How do you operate? How do you want this to come? And so with these, we work with some of the greatest clients across the country on very complex planning and wealth management, and there's a lot of moving parts, and they just make it so easy for the continuity and the way that I think and the way that we want to present and all the follow-ups that, are happening. And I also sense their authenticity. Like I'm pretty good at reading people if they were just trying to do things to, move up or, kind of butter the person that they're trying to impress. It's just this innate desire, not only to do well themselves, but I'm noticing the ones that make my life so much easier as I try to balance a lot of different pieces of, running an organization and client meetings and things like that. So that was the first thing that I was thinking about, is that those are things that you can take at any stage of your career. Here are these young professionals that are growing and developing and saying, okay, I want to progress in my own career. If I focus on others and making their world better, if I focus on the team and the clients and doing things for everyone else, by default, leaders like myself and Ross and Gina, we will recognize what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to tell us, you don't have to create a report. I did this. Like, we see the greatness in a lot of our young professionals. And by default, then they're going to be moving up, within the organization. I think the other thing too, Jordan, is whenever you see that in young professionals, is giving them the opportunity to lead and grow.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's been unique here. Our young professionals, how much of a leadership capacity and role that they play in the firm. Testing those muscles, letting them lead different projects, let them be in with others, on the team. It's been pretty amazing to see, the leadership development that's happening, for the young professionals. And I just take a lot of pride and joy out of that, which I'm sure you do too, when you see people just growing and developing those muscles.
Well, that's so evident in your team. I'm glad you brought that up, because there's making the leader's agenda your agenda, the things that are very specific to the leader, but there's also, adding value outside of that agenda, which is a little bit of what you're talking about. I want to point this out because I see this in Scott and Trent and Kayla. I think Gina's been a good example of this. Obviously, she's now leading at a super high level. Here's the application question. Where are you taking responsibility outside the lane of your authority? And I think when a young leader or an emerging leader decides to start taking responsibility outside of their role, outside of their responsibility, it's like, hey, this isn't necessarily my project, but I'll get involved. Or this isn't my mess, but I'll clean it up. This isn't my assignment, but I want to chip in. And you've got this long history of a bunch of leaders who are willing to do that, whether it be Trent or Scott or Kayla or Gina. I mean, just people who are saying, hey, it's not about me. This isn't necessarily in my role, but I'm a part of the team and I value the team. Therefore, I'm going to jump in and make McGill Junkie better or add value to a client or get involved in that project. So if you're a leader listening who wants to expand their influence, two things. One would be make the leader's agenda your agenda. Also, figure out a way to take responsibility outside of your authority. And if you do that for long enough, I think leaders like Ed, Ross, and Gina take note of that and say, hey, I want to give you more responsibility. I'm going to extend more trust. So I love what you just shared.
Dude, that was just unbelievable. Those are the two last golden nuggets that if you're listening to this today, that you take that, because that succinctly was just incredible. So I love that part there. And in closing, Jordan, I am tremendously excited for where you're going. You're such a young, energetic professional. When I say young, you're getting more mature. You're getting a little bit older.
Got some grit.
Yeah, on that side then too. But the opportunity and the vision for the impact that you can have is just incredible. And I love that we're in this relationship together, and I'm kind of at the forefront with you as you continue to grow and develop. If others want to know more about you, get your book, see some of your podcasts, see some of your coaching and different pieces you're doing, what's the best way to get a hold of you, Jordan?
Well, before I respond to that, it's funny because you did exactly what we just described, which is like you're going to make somebody else's agenda your agenda. I mean, truly, like I just want to give a shout out to the McGill Junkie team, because I think you, Ross, and Gina, the entire team, I mean, you've done such a good job of getting behind people, making them feel valued, and like putting wind at their back, right? And saying like, hey, we want to help you be all that you can be and cast vision for your future. And how do we get behind you? And I know when this book came out, you bought a bunch of copies, and we did this event together with Maxwell, and you said a bunch of kind things, and you were really intentional in a very public way to make sure that, you know, I felt valued. And so, so again, I just see this over and over again, and I want to point that out. I see what you just did there, Ed. So thank you for that. Yeah, MontgomeryCompanies.com is our website. Would love to add value. The Art of Encouragement is the book. You get it on Amazon. And then there's somebody listening who's like, hey, I don't even know if I've got a coaching need. I don't really need a speaker, but maybe I do just have a question about leadership or development. If you're important to Ed and the McGill Junkie team, I just say reach out to me, send me a message on LinkedIn, contact us through the website. If I can jump on a quick call or respond to a quick email just with my friend hat on, would love to add value that way too to anybody listening. So Ed, this is a joy, man. Thanks for your friendship and your leadership, and you're having a huge impact. I mean, you, Ross, Gina, the team, just on a Fortune 100 company. And John Roberts said this to me directly about you. He said, I you don't always see it in leaders who are willing to prioritize the greater good of a larger organization at the sacrifice or at the expense of what's best for them. And again, I've seen you and your team do that. Is hey, we want to add value to other people, and whether we win or not, we're going to be committed to that process. Sometimes that means you don't win. And John just said, who's a high level executive, said that really stands out about Ed and the McGill Junkie team. So I've seen that too. I love running with you, man. This is just a ton of fun.
It has been. You're a true friend of the firm. Love you a ton in our friendship, and looking forward to what we're going to each do together, as well as our respective teams. And signing off on leadership with Ed.
God bless you, man. Thanks for having me.